What's happening, everybody? Welcome back. We're here for another Fall Obsession podcast episode. My name is Sam Thrash. I'm your host over here. Thanks for tuning into our show. This week, my guest is the Madman himself, Steve Martic from the Outdoor Drive podcast. Awesome dudes over there, East Coast Trev and Madman Steve. They do some awesome work on the Outdoor Drive podcast. They invited me to come on their show a couple months ago or so now. That's what originally started this collaboration, and I tried to get both of them on here at the same time, but scheduling and all that kind of stuff always plays a factor. So worked out for me to record with Steve first, and we're going to try to get Trev on the show here later. And if you guys want to go back and listen to their podcast that they did with me, I think that's episode 252 or something like that of their show, just titled Fall Obsession Podcast over there, so you can go check that out. But either way, awesome conversation with Steve. They're Northeastern guys up there in Connecticut and that whole neck of the woods and everything up there. So it was really interesting to get to talk to him about hunting up there. Really went down an awesome kind of, sentimental rabbit hole of talking about growing up hunting with our dads and everything, and a lot of his experiences that he had growing up reminded me of my experiences hunting with my dad growing up. So we kind of got to share that with each other and everything through this podcast. And it really made for a great episode. In addition to talking about podcasting and the grind that comes with that and running a show in the hunting and outdoor space, all that kind of stuff. So great episode. Hope you guys enjoyed as much as I did. Before we get to the meat of it, though, you guys know the drill. Got to talk about some sponsors, those partners that make Fall Obsession Podcast happen. The first one being Hoot Camo. Love my Hoot Camo. Looking forward to wearing it in Idaho this year on my upcoming elk hunt. I'm super excited about it. The gear is amazing. The patterns are super versatile, multifunctional. Just crazy how they adapt to different environments and everything. Go check them out for yourself, hootcamo.com. If you want to see the film from last year's mule deer hunt, that's titled Flatland Deer Country on our YouTube channel. Go watch that now. You guys can use the code FallObsession15 when you place your order from Hoot. Doesn't matter how big or small the order is. You might want to order a full set of camo, maybe just a hat or a shirt, some lifestyle wear, whatever it might be. Use that code FallObsession15, save you some money at checkout. It also lets the guys over there at Hoot know that you came from us. We always appreciate it. Go check them out. Hoot Camo. News on Safaris is a Fall Obsession podcast partner. If you guys have been thinking about going on that big African safari adventure, maybe saving up for it, wanting a good experience, you need to book with News On. We have folks on our team and outside of our organization that we know that have hunted with News On and have had a great experience. And what's better is News On is offering Fall Obsession podcast listeners some savings if you book with them and tell them that Fall Obsession sent you. So give Tim a call. I'll give you his number here in a second, but if you tell him that we sent you his way, you'll get $500 trophy credit, free lodging, food, and drinks. Your professional hunter, skinner, and tracker fees are going to be covered, and your basic trophy prep is taken care of. It's a $2,250 value per person, and that's valid for up to 4 people in your hunting party. So you do the quick math on that. That's could be $9,000 in savings on your safari. We all know that it's a big expense going over there, and that's a big chunk that you can knock off just by telling Tim that Fall Obsession sent you. So Tim's phone number is 303-946-9441. Give him a call and book your next safari with News On. Trophy Edits is a Fall Obsession podcast partner. I'm sure that we have all had those pictures where it's a memorable hunt, a big deer, a significant moment for us. We're excited to see that picture and reflect back on that memory. But once you see it, it just doesn't quite do it justice. Maybe the lighting was wrong, it was too dark, or perhaps there's a bunch of blood all over the place that you didn't really get cleaned up, and you're kind of you don't want to show it to the squeamish family members at Thanksgiving, right? So Trophy Edits cleans all that stuff up for you and makes the most out of those pictures and those memories that you have. So if you want to see what all they can offer, what all they can do for you, then go to the link in the description on this podcast. There should be a link on any of our podcast episodes here recently for the Trophy Edits. Check them out, and by clicking that link, it'll let them know that Fall Obsession sent you their way. Elite Archery is a podcast partner of Fall Obsession. I've been shooting an Elite bow for several seasons now. No intentions of stopping that. I love my Elite bow, and I can sit up here and talk to you guys exactly why I like it and how much I love it and all that good stuff. But the ultimate test for you guys is going to be to go to your local elite dealer and actually take the Elite Shootability Challenge and see what you think for yourself. Compare it to other brands, compare it to your existing bow now, compare it to whatever bow you might be thinking about purchasing, and see what you think. You won't be disappointed. The Outdoor Call Radio app is another podcast partner, Outdoors Dan from Respect the Game TV. He created an app that you can download on any device where you can stream hunting shows and podcasts on a loop every single day. Fall Obsession podcast plays on that loop on Mondays. That's the same day as our new publications. Our friends over at the Outdoor Drive podcast, Steve and Trev, they're actually on the Outdoor Call Radio app as well, and they also play on Mondays. I think our episodes are actually back to back on that loop on that day of the week, so you guys can catch both of our shows weekly on there. Go download the app, follow Outdoors Dan and the Outdoor Call Radio on Facebook as well, because Outdoors Dan does a couple of different live radio shows throughout the week, and those broadcasts are shared on his social media platforms. The Outdoor Call Radio app, go download it. Last but not least, Ridge Rock Hunt Company is another podcast partner. Derek Eves over there in Mississippi, he is the man if you are looking to book your next North American adventure with a vetted and trusted outfitter. Derek has a ton of different outfitters in his network that he knows, loves, trusts, and sets his clients up with. So if you're looking for that next experience, you want it to be worth your while, you need to give Derek Eves a call with Ridge Rock Hunt Company, and he will get you squared away. Thank you guys for tuning in to another Fall Obsession podcast. Whatever podcast platform you are streaming this episode on, hit that follow or subscribe button up there, whatever they have for you. And if turning your notifications on is an option, please do that. That way you know every time we drop a new podcast episode. If you're into podcast videos, then we drop new podcast videos on our YouTube channel every Thursday for whatever episode dropped the previous Monday. So you guys can check those out over there, as well as all of our other productions that we put on our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us on all the major social media platforms, and check out our shows on Carbon TV. This podcast streams on there. Our staff-inspired video podcast series Couch Chats is on Carbon TV, as well as our two different hunting shows, Texas Dirt and Midwest Mindset. We're currently working on editing some new episodes for both of those shows, so we're going to have a lot of new content coming out for those in the very near future. Go to fallobsession.com, check out the website. That's the hub. You can see all of our content filtering through there. We also have a lot of new educational deer hunting related articles on our website right now, thanks to one of our staff members, Ryan, up there in New York. He's been writing a lot for us here lately, and has some awesome content on there for you guys, some educational stuff, like I said, for whitetail hunters that are getting prepped up for the season. So go check those out. Check out the store, pick you up a hat or a shirt. I'm actually wearing in the podcast video our Pronghorn Country shirt. Been a while since I busted out this Pronghorn Country tee. But if you guys want to pick up some apparel, support a small-time hunting brand, we always appreciate it. But like I always say, the cheapest, easiest, fastest way that you can support us is by clicking that share button. It helps us out way more than you guys realize, and we always appreciate it. With that, I'm done rambling. We're going over to our episode with Steve. You guys are listening to another Fall Obsession podcast.
Oh, you got her, dude. She's down. Let's go.
Dude, I just shot a deer of a lifetime.
Freaking smoked him.
One with nature, and if you're a believer, one with God.
Definitely gets your heart pumping. Boy, you are in trouble.
Fall Obsession Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Another Fall Obsession podcast. I'm Sam, your host, and I am joined by the Madman himself, Steve Martic from the Outdoor Drive. Welcome to Fall Obsession podcast, man.
What up, Sam? How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Great. One day closer to deer season.
One day closer, man. It is creeping up, and I cannot wait. I'm excited.
Yeah. It's the days that we live for are right around the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say some long, hard-working summers are about to pay off. So, man, I wanna break the ice, and for our listeners that never heard your name before or don't know anything about the Outdoor Drive, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, where you're from.
Yeah, man. So Steve Martic, somehow I got coined the nickname Madman Martic, and it stuck. So that's my my alias. But I'm from Connecticut. I co-host the Outdoor Drive podcast with Trev. His alias is East Coast Trev. Um, yeah, I was not an original, podcaster with Trev. Trev actually had a previous podcast with another group of guys. That kind of fizzled out. Started the Outdoor Drive, and even with the Outdoor Drive, I never was like on the podcast. But Trev would joke around. He'd call me the manager. Like I'd hit him up on the side and be like, "Hey, good episode." Or more importantly, I would critique him, and I'd be like, "Dude, don't do that anymore. Like that was terrible." Or like I'd come up with guest ideas, or like, "Hey, man, you should reach out to this guy or do more of this." So he would just call me the manager, manager. Well, after a couple of years, there was kind of an opening, and Trev offered me a spot to come on the podcast with him as a co-host and all that stuff. And going on 2 years now with him running the Outdoor Drive, and it's a lot of fun, man. Like I honestly can't remember what it was like not being involved.
Yeah, no, for sure. Were you ever nervous or intimidated or anything like that when you first actually got, in front of the microphone, in front of the camera, that kind of thing, and hopped on the podcast?
I still hate the camera for sure. It's not for me.
It's never flattering. Yeah.
Podcast. I've done the podcast enough where I don't. It's just like just
Right.
send it now. But so I did a couple podcasts with the Outdoor Drive as a guest,
Okay.
and it was actually funny because back to my manager days, I had come up with an idea for like I don't know what you'd call it, like a spin-off episode. It was called Killer's Corner, and it was like we had our regular episodes, and then Killer's Corner would be like somebody or a buddy had killed something or had a cool story, and they'd come on, and it would be like half-hour podcast. They'd just come on and just tell the story. Yeah. And they launched it. They started running it. Well, that year I killed like a pretty decent buck. So like, hey man, you gotta come on to a Killer's Corner. And I was like, oh, I never thought that I was gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
Man, I was so nervous. I felt like I rambled, and just you get in those long-winded, like nobody interrupts you for a while, and you're just like, and then you start you're talking, but your mind's going somewhere else. And like I remember after I was like, dude, you have to delete that. We have to do it again. We got to record it again. He's like, no, man, it's fine. And I'm like, no, I didn't want to listen to it. I was scared to death to hear my own podcast. Now it's just like, yeah, whatever. Like sometimes I don't even go back and listen to our own episodes. It's just like you record it and send it, and it is what it is.
Yeah, I'd have trouble going back and listening to my own podcast. One, because I don't like the way that I sound. which is ironic for a show. Yeah, exactly. But and then the other thing is like once you record and then edit and everything, it's like I've heard it. I don't really feel like I need to go listen to it or anything like that. But I've been on a few other shows. Y'all's being one. Y'all extended the original invite for me to join you guys. But the very first time I was ever on somebody else's show was actually Outdoors Dan from the Outdoor Call Radio. He had me on a live radio show with him, and that was a little nerve-wracking for me just from the element of this is live right now. Like if I mess up, it's on me. So I was used to recording podcasts, but with an editing room soon to follow, up until that point. So that was a little nerve-wracking for me, first time joining somebody else. But
yeah, we actually Trev's actually getting ready to do a live one with Dan in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Actually go live every week.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we were doing it yet when you were. I bet you we were.
Yeah, I was. I remember that I was live with you guys and everything, and that was pretty cool. There's a lot of podcasts I'm seeing that are doing that more and more, it seems like, and I imagine at some point we'll get out of our behind the times show over here, pre-recording and everything, and maybe start doing some live episodes. It hadn't happened yet, but it was fun.
Yeah, we still get the bulk of our listeners, after it goes up on the platforms, because I think a lot of guys, driving to work or at work with a headphone in or whatever. But the best thing about live is having the live chat
Yeah.
where people can comment or question, and you can read those comments and give feedback to the guests at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what does the name The Outdoor Drive signify? Why'd y'all come up with that?
Mainly the drive is like the motivation. Like we ask every guest, as you know, because you've been a guest, what drives you outdoors?
Yeah.
And it's the more you think about it, the deeper it gets, because we all have those days, whether it's in season or out of season, where, man, you're just tired and you don't feel like getting up, or it's cold, or it's raining, or it's windy. And it's like, man, you got to keep that drive. You got to get in that tree, but it extends into the postseason, putting on those mile shed hunting and postseason scouting, and running cameras when it's 100 degrees out and humid, and the bugs, and but you keep doing it because you've got that drive, you got that motivation to just stay after it.
Yeah. No, I love it. That's awesome. So you mentioned a little earlier that somehow you got nickname Madman Martic, and then Trev is East Coast Trev. Is there a story behind the nicknames, or was it just one day it just showed up?
Not that I can't. I'd have to ask him, but Trev's been East Coast Trev forever. Like since like I said, he had a previous his previous podcast was called the East Coast Bow Hunting Podcast.
Gotcha.
And he was East Coast Trev. Mine, I think it just came from, believe it or not, I've actually chilled out in the last few years, but like, I think it just came from me just being like an animal, as far as just like the drive, getting after it. Like I was always in the woods, always scouting, always glassing, like, almost motivating my group of buddies and friends around me. Like, what are you doing? Like, why aren't you shooting your bow right now? Like, you're not, like, I'm sending Snapchats of bucks in the field and everybody else is sitting at home eating ice cream. I'm like, you guys gotta, like, go take a ride, man. The bucks are moving, And I think it just came out of Trev's mouth one night on a podcast, and he was like, the Madman himself, Steve Martic. And then ever since then, it's just been Madman Martic.
Just stuck.
You don't get to pick your own nicknames. That's how they work. Like somebody kind of throws it, and one day one sticks, and you're kind of just stuck with it.
Yeah, that's exactly how it works for sure, and as it should be. I work at a firehouse full time, so there's plenty of nicknames floating around, and there's plenty of stories that go with them. That's why I ask if there's any big story or anything, because I'm always curious when I hear a nickname. So that's fun.
Yeah, nothing too cool. I should have thought about it, and I could have made one up. I had a better story, but no, I don't have nothing.
You gotta have something to go with the name Madman, So,
Yep.
So do you guys podcast full time, or are you guys still full time elsewhere, making a paycheck outside of the outdoor industry?
Oh, definitely not full time. We both have full time jobs, and it's probably gonna be that way for a while,
Yeah,
for sure. But
I hear you.
Yeah.
So what's from your perspective, right? I know we probably share a lot of the same grind and everything in regards to podcasting, but from your perspective, what's it like being full-time employee elsewhere and then being a part of this consistent weekly podcast game?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, I've always been a good worker, right? Like, just instilled in me, I get up and go to work every day, have no problem getting out of bed and showing up and doing my job. The podcast is really good for me as far as, like, I wouldn't say it's a distraction, but no matter what's going on in work and personal life and good days, bad days, or whatever, there's always that one thing to look forward to during the week. Like, we record Thursday nights, and it's like, oh man, we've got Sam on Thursday night. Like, I can't wait for that episode, and there's always something in the calendar in the near future, to look forward to. And like, a lot of times, like, it may be my favorite night of the week, like, get 2 more nights, podcast night, and you just get to sit down for that. We usually record, just like you, 45 minutes to an hour. But a lot of times that turns into an hour and a half, 2 hours sitting behind the computer, because you got we've been joking around a lot lately calling it the green room, but the pre-recording talk with the guest.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times you turn the recorder off and you might be there another half hour, 45 minutes, still shooting it with the guests and all that stuff. And yeah, it's just a good night of the week to just sit down with all different people.
Yeah. Do you guys always do virtual, or do you do any in-person episodes?
We've done a couple in person. Man, it's changed. We've had a lot of we've had a lot of ups and downs in the last couple of years as far as like losing studios, moving, residents and all that stuff. So there was one time like we had like not a studio, it was a basement studio, but it was a studio, and we would get together every week side by side and record.
Yeah.
And man, that is the best for sure, right? And just with me and Trev live an hour and 15 minutes away. So it's not always easy. We just said an hour, 45-minute hour episode can turn into 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you had an hour commute one way, and then you get done, and then it's an hour back. Like there's some late nights and their work nights,
Oh yeah.
So lately most podcasts are virtual. Trev logs on from his location, I log on from my location, the guest logs on, and we do that. But there was a short time, I would say a couple months, we would meet in the middle on a piece of public land, public land parking lot, and we would record in the front seat of my truck, sitting at a piece of public, and side by side. So it was like we called it the mobile studio, the old F-150, and that was really cool. But again, like after a while, it turns into like that travel time adds up, and it's just easier to you can eat dinner, set the fork down, and be logged on in 2 minutes.
Exactly.
As opposed to muting a half an hour and a half an hour back and all that stuff. But just a couple weeks ago, probably 4 episodes ago or so, we had met up after work. Some gear had come in the mail, so we met up after work to do a little like unboxing, YouTube video or whatever, and we recorded that night. And it was like, man, we're back in the mobile studio, sitting on the same piece of public, recording an episode side by side. And I tell you what, there was something about that episode. Oh, that episode too, we didn't have a guest. It was just me and Trev.
Yeah.
Me and Trev side by side, face to face, and like, man, it has such a better vibe.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. I always enjoy the in-person podcast. It flows so much more naturally. I feel like you're able to dive so much deeper into a lot of stuff as well. And yes, they do go longer. I feel like I've been on a rare roll here lately. It's like every other episode for the past month or two has been an in-person podcast, just either with different guests and everything. But I'm kind of in the same boat down here. Like the closest guy on our team from me is over an hour from me, and as you guys know, you add the virtual element, it opens you up to so many guests in the hunting and outdoor space that you can have on the show, and yeah, you get to record with some really cool people.
Oh, for that, that's my favorite part about podcasting is, and social media falls into that realm too. Like, I guess you don't have to be a podcaster for this to happen, but just knowing and having access to people that you wouldn't have access to without social media. I think being a podcaster opens it up a step further, because instead of just like, hey, me and Sam are Facebook friends, or I follow him on Instagram, he follows me on Instagram, we like each other's pictures. Once you sit down and podcast with somebody, you have a different connection, and you walk away like, now we're buddies, now we're friends, because we had an hour and a half conversation,
Yeah. No, absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more with that. We actually got to go here recently. It was pretty cool. We got to go. I don't know if you know who a guy named Dale Brisby is. Basically, like he's a comedian, but the world's greatest bull rider and everything. And he actually invited us to come out to his studio, which is like an hour and a half from me, and we recorded an episode for our show in person with him in his studio. And that was an incredible experience, and kind of humbling for me as a podcast host, right? Because I'm in a home studio with just some personal, stories and memories on the wall behind me and everything. But getting to actually sit down in a room that's built for podcasting, I was almost a little intimidated. Like, man, over 200 episodes, yet this is still a first for me,
Yeah. Yep. That's another cool thing is just some of the doors that opens and the opportunities that are offered to you. And like, to me still sometimes like, I'm like, why, like, who am I? I'm the nobody, right?
Yeah,
I just happen to have a podcast and people happen to listen to it. You know what I mean? And like, sometimes I even wonder, like, I don't even know why anyone listens to me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But then every once in a while, this opportunity comes along. You get invited to go somewhere or hang out with somebody or do something. And you're like, man, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm just talking into a mic and half the time I don't even know what I'm talking about. And
Just rambling on. Yeah.
Yeah, it just opens up the doors for relationships and cool opportunities,
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny to hear y'all talk about recording in the truck or on public land, because we've done that many times. When we first started our show, we had just a simple recorder and everything. We didn't have mics or headphones or anything like that, and we were like, well, where's a quiet place we can go? And literally, like, most of the first 10 episodes, I feel like, were recorded in the cab of a pickup. There's no video version or anything like that, just us hanging out and talking and stuff. And yeah, it was after 10 or 20 episodes we started getting a little bit more detailed with some of our equipment and everything, and got a little bit better quality of audio. But yeah, those first 10 episodes are about as simple and raw as it gets, I feel like.
I mean, I'll be honest with you, the cab of a pickup truck has some pretty good acoustics.
Hey, it's not bad. It's not bad.
But I mean, I don't know how many, how much stress, behind the scenes stress that, you've endured. But a lot of people don't realize, like, just scheduling podcasts and who do you have lined up next week or the following week, or we've got a whole, like, we have somebody 2 weeks from now, but we don't have anyone next week. Like, who are we going to get? Trying to get people last minute. Shit comes up, right? Someone cancels, and someone could cancel the night you're supposed to record.
Mm-hmm.
And like, as listeners, because I'm still a podcast consumer. And before Trev gave me the opportunity to be on the Outdoor Drive, I was a huge consumer, right? And you don't realize all that stuff, And me and Trev joke around all the time, like, man, if people knew the troubleshooting we go through behind the scenes to make sure an episode comes out every single week, it would blow people's mind. Like there's sometimes where I'm like, man, this thing's being held together by Scotch tape right now. But come Friday morning, brand new episode up.
Yep.
Didn't miss a beat. It's there. We figured it out,
Yeah.
And sometimes it's calling a buddy last minute, like, hey, what are you doing? Can you jump on? Like, we need a guest.
Yeah.
Like, we're in a jam, and somehow you figure it out, man. And we take a lot of pride in not missing an episode.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that exact experience, because it's the same over here, right? Right now I feel like I haven't felt this good about my recording schedule in a long time, because I know we were texting back and forth when we were setting this up and everything, and it took us a few reschedules just for various things to actually make this one happen. And I know you said multiple times, like, man, I don't want to leave you in a bind, like, as long as you got an episode. And I told you, I was like, man, for once in my life, I feel like I have a full recording schedule right now, because I knew I had this elk hunt coming up here in a month. So I was like, I got to start stacking some episodes up. That way, while I'm in the mountains for over a week, like, I still got, podcasts dropping and that kind of stuff. And it's paid off, because we're a couple episodes ahead right now for once, it seems like. But we drop on Mondays. I have recorded podcast on Sunday night, edited Sunday night, and uploaded for the next day. I've recorded with a guest before, be like, yeah, so this one's coming out tomorrow morning. They're like, are you serious?
Yeah, we do that often.
Yeah.
More often than I like to admit. But like I said, it doesn't matter. It's not the best. You're living on the edge, right? You're flirting with disaster. You're alive. Right?
Yeah.
But you know what? It drops. And it doesn't matter if we get done recording at 11 o'clock at night on a Thursday night and it drops at midnight Friday morning. There's an episode there.
Yeah.
And then we'll repeat the cycle again,
Yep. And then the clock starts all over again. Exactly. No, I feel like one thing I started doing, and it's not the best thing, but I don't really have like you guys have each other as co-hosts and everything, which is an awesome dynamic. We don't necessarily have that over here, at least on a regular basis. So I actually started, a buddy of mine who's also a podcast host kind of talked to me. He's like, man, try a solo episode. And he said, come up with don't just ramble, like come up with a purposeful and meaningful topic that's meaningful to you, like to me, and go for it. And never really thought about it, never really wanted to do that, but it ended up working out. I've done a handful of them. Sometimes if I have a free night, I might just record one and just tuck it back in the bank just for a week when I'm busy and I can't sit down with somebody, but that's helped with the same struggle of managing the schedule and everything. And yeah, there's been several people that have been kind of blown away that they got to be on a podcast because it was a last minute text message. Hey man, what you doing?
Yeah. You.
Yeah, that it actually.
That's your. How much of a friend are you? Because I need to get on right now.
Yeah, exactly. My neighbor across the street, really awesome dude and everything. And the first episode I did with him, he had never been on a hunting show or anything like that before. He had actually just started bow hunting. Like that year was his first year to ever bow hunt in his life, or ever hunt in Texas in his life. And so one day I was like, man, I need an episode. So I was like, hey man, you want to come over and we'll talk about just, you entering hunting for the first time in your life.
Right.
That dude's been
great.
That dude's done 7 episodes with me now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's been a really cool dynamic, and yeah, he's dipped into some controversial topics before, but people love it. People have eaten it up. So it's been fun, but.
Yeah. The other thing that I don't know if you've noticed this yet, but you would think, the in season, right? Like we're coming into the fall. There's gonna be a lot going on. In theory, there's more to talk about, right? Like we're here, it's season. Well, sometimes it's harder to get guests because everybody's in the woods, everybody's hunting, everybody's like grinding, like it's work. And if you're not at work, you're in the woods. And the off season, summertime, it's a lot easier to reach out to guys because they have more downtime, and unless if somebody does something special, somebody kills a big buck or anything, right, an elk, you can usually snag them after, like, hey, I saw you shot a nice elk, like you want to come on and like tell the story, like we want to hear about it. That's easy. But those guys that like, especially like tactic guys, like you want to have a guy come on and talk about wind and thermals or moon phases or hunting the rut. Well, it's the rut, and he's hunting it. So he's those guys are hard to land in season.
Yeah. No, I agree with that for sure. Yeah, I try to bank some stuff up, and it turns out like we end up doing a lot of what I call in-house podcasts with our team that we have, the different staff members across the country throughout the season. It seems like, which is cool too, because you're literally talking to everyday blue collar people that wouldn't be on a platform or anything, otherwise. So the stories and the experiences are authentic and, very relatable for a lot of people. So folks enjoy that.
Absolutely. We actually have a buddy of ours. We were actually just guests on his podcast last week. He started his podcast kind of because of us. Always as a follower, listener of us, started his own, and it's called Average Joe's Hunting Podcast. And his goal is to just have average, everyday Joes, and he don't care if it's a spike buck or a Jake turkey. Like, man, come on and tell us about it.
Man, it is, and that's the other thing that I don't know that people fully realize is how easy it is to start a podcast. I mean, yeah, you can dive deep and get stuff to give you a decent quality of audio and, dive into the media and the quality side of everything. But I mean, yeah, it's very simple and very easy to start something up and to be able to publish it. And, I've always told people once you can show like if you want to do it long term, right, and you want to grow that brand, or you have a passion for it and it kind of takes off, once you show consistency and dedication to it just through producing episodes, then you can kind of gain some traction that way. But as far as just being able to record and share experiences with one another. It is so easy these days.
For sure. You say that, and I agree. But thank God Trev started it without me, and I just kind of got to jump in because I would have never done it if it wasn't already set up, and I just had to be like, "What do I do? Just hold this microphone and talk? Okay, sounds good to me." Like to this day, I don't do anything else, right? I'm not editing anything, like I'm not uploading, or I have no idea how the platforms work and how the episodes launch or whatever. But I'll turn on the mic and start talking, and if he messes it up, if the upload is bad or the audio is bad, I'll be the first one to call him up and say, "Hey, you screwed up," but don't ask me to fix it because I don't know.
Oh, that's awesome. So, you guys are in the Northeast, right?
Oh yeah, yep.
So, talk to me about hunting in your area, because as you know, I'm a Texas boy down here, and I've hunted a little bit, dabbled out west and everything. I've never ventured up y'all's way. What is hunting in the Northeast like?
Well, I had to think about that for a sec because
I know it's a broad question, but
well, it's kind of all I know, right? Like I have gone to Ohio and hunted some public, but it's like same thing with you, right? Like if you grow up in Texas and you hunt Texas and it's all you know, you almost all the little ins and outs and the niches you kind of take for granted. Um, yeah, so I'm in Connecticut, southeast Connecticut to be specific, and I don't know what people think of when they think of Connecticut, but it's I think it's more country than most people think, right? Because I think a lot of people think of Connecticut, they're thinking like Western Connecticut, like just outside of New York City, and like the Greenwich area and all the money and stuff. But I'm on the far east side, and we have ag land and a lot of woods and a lot of back roads and a lot of country towns and stuff like that. Um, Not great ag. So like almost every field is either just to sound cool at CRP, but it's just basically a field that someone brush hogs once a year. Um, Low end hay, not even good quality hay, and cow corn. We don't have soybeans or any of that cool stuff. Um, and then the public, there's almost never ag on public. So the private, you'll have the private ag field, and then like if you're lucky, you'll catch a piece of public that's adjacent to it or butts up to it. Um, there's a decent amount of public. I feel like I don't think there's shortage of it, but we're kind of high population for a small state too, and with a quite a bit of hunters. So the public can get the public can get a little jammed up and a little overcrowded, but it doesn't stop us from getting after it.
yeah. So, are you guys hunting? And this is just me at a novice level, right? I'm ignorant. Are you guys allowed to bait? You hunting trails and sign? What's whitetail hunting entail with that kind of stuff, as far as how you determine where you're going?
Me personally, or just as a state?
Yeah, you personally.
All right, so Connecticut's also weird. We have there's 12 zones in Connecticut, hunting zones. 2 of them are bait zones.
Okay.
So that you can legally bait in Connecticut, but only 2 zones, which is our southern zones along the southern coastline. I'm not in a bait zone. I've never hunted in a bait zone. So I'm a big scrape hunter. Mock scrapes, at least my cameras are always on mock scrapes for the most part. I think right now I have 8 cell cameras out on public. One of them is not on a mock scrape. The other one's on like a little like pinch point in the bottom, like coming out of bedding and up over a hill. Yeah, big scrape. And the reason why I do that, I mean, I'm sure bucks can slip me and, they could be there and I could not get them on camera. But my thought is if it's a good mock scrape and it's in a good location, it's on an oak flat. If there's a buck in the area on that oak flat, there's a good chance he's going to come check it out.
Gotcha.
And in my opinion, it's the best way to at least take inventory at one time or another. I'm going to catch a picture of that buck to know he's around.
Gotcha.
Other than that, so one thing that's we actually just talked about this on our podcast a couple weeks ago. One thing that's different for New England, and again, I take it for granted. I think a lot of guys take it for granted because it's just the way it is we have stone walls. Where Texas, I'm sure you guys have fence lines, right? Like you hunt fence lines, like a gap in a fence line or a brushy fence line or something like that.
Yeah, there's definitely crossing points and stuff like that we pinpoint and everything. Man, it is, at least in my experience, sometimes it just kind of feels like a shot in the dark with some of that stuff, because you can feel like you got them pegged, like, okay, yeah, they're coming through this spot, they're jumping the fence over here, they're doing all this, and then they do something completely different. It's flat and scrub brush, and yeah, they have their routines and everything, but sometimes just depending on the land and your brush and everything, like they can easily skirt around you or just decide they're gonna slip in a different way. So
right. So back to the stone walls. Connecticut used to be vastly farmland, lots and lots of farmland, and through, last couple hundred years, a lot of that farmland's grown up and it's now like mature hardwoods. Well, because we're in the Northeast, it's hilly terrain, a lot of rocks, a lot of field stone, but fairly round stones. Well, the farmers used, when they would till the land and they'd kick up a new stone, they'd throw it off to the side and they'd start building these rock walls, stone walls. They're usually 3 or 4 feet high, and they would be the perimeter of all the fields. Well, over time, as the farmland went dormant and turned into woods and now timber, we have these stone walls all throughout Connecticut, through the middle of the woods. So it now can create like a structure, like just like bass, like you bass fish, you'd like hunt a structure like a underwater rock pile or whatever.
mm-hmm.
You could be in the middle of the woods, half mile from the parking lot, and there's this stone wall or network of stone walls in the middle of the timber, and there might be an old barway or a break in the wall or inside corner, outside corner, and just like you would hunt your fence lines, low spot or crossing or whatever, we do that, but it's in the middle of the woods.
Huh. Interesting.
It's pretty cool. Yeah, and to me, like, I grew up with stone walls. Like, I didn't even think it was regional based as a kid until I was probably in my early 20s, and I was working with a kid from Tennessee. And he's like, "Hey, man, y'all got them stone walls." And I'm like, "Yeah, what about them?" He's like, no one else has those. And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "That's a New England thing." And I was like, "Really?" Like, they're everywhere. They're literally like, you cannot go in the woods and not see a stone wall up here.
Wow.
And he's like, "Yeah, that's just a New England thing. You get out of New England, you don't see very many stone walls." And I was like, I never thought of that before. So as a hunter growing up, like as a little kid going with my dad, and tactics were way different back then, right? This is like way before YouTube and the Drurys and all that stuff. Like basically, I grew up watching real tree monster bucks,
Yep.
But when we would hunt, and it was basically like a homemade ladder stand popped up in the woods. But like, man, I'll tell you what, it was hard pressed to tell a hunting story or hear a hunting story that didn't have something to do with the stone wall. Like it was either he came through the break in the wall, or he was parallel on the wall, or he jumped the wall and there he was. And it's like they are a very big part of how the woods works. And if you don't stop to think about it, you can take it for granted and overlook it because it's just such a natural occurring thing.
Wow. I would have never guessed that. Hearing that now, like I think of, some hunting shows or photos, whatever I might have seen just randomly over the years and stuff. And I recall, seeing that kind of thing and just thinking, oh, that's different, right? I didn't realize it was such a common thing up there. That's crazy.
Yeah. And then they'll get you the opposite during turkey season. Because believe it or not, a stone wall can hang up a turkey very easily.
I imagine.
And like I said, so you could be set up, you get set up and he's gobbling and you're set up and you're calling and he is not coming any closer. And you're like, he's stuck behind that stone wall. Like, he ain't coming over the stone wall.
Oh man. Yeah. Blessing and a curse, I guess, depending on what you're after.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So you mentioned having 7 or 8 cameras on public land and keeping an eye on those mock scrapes and everything like that. As far as public land hunting up there and having that many cameras out and everything, you get a lot of people jacking with your stuff, or is it pretty laid back?
I've knocked on wood. I don't want to jinx myself now. I've had fairly good luck. To be completely honest, I grew up a private land snob, right? Like I was fortunate, and I didn't have a ton of private land, but I grew up with like a decent little. I think it was like 50 acres or so, right across the street from the house I grew up in. It was a Christmas tree farm, and we actually were. You know what crop damage tags would be?
Yes, I'm familiar.
So yeah, so we were able to get crop damage tags because the deer were, damaging the Christmas trees, and there was a, revenue loss. Just me and my dad. So very fortunate to have that as a young kid because my dad was able to take me out in the woods, all positive experiences. He never had to take me to public and run into that one guy that's got an attitude problem, or just
Right.
put me in a possible bad situation with a lot of other guys. And I grew up hunting that farm. I mean, my whole life, and then we'd get a farm right on the other side of the swamp, and I'd have a hand, say 3 or 4 pieces of private. And it was nice, a couple preset ladder stands on each piece, and you had a couple options as far as, and back then, man, we weren't playing the wind, like I didn't even know I didn't even think about it. Like I can remember being a kid. First of all, we didn't have smartphones to check the app, so you'd have to turn on the weather channel. And the only thing we were looking at, the night before we were going hunting was how cold was it going to be in the morning, because I need to know if I'm wearing 1 pair of socks or 2 pairs of socks. And that was it. Like I didn't care what the wind was doing, the barometric pressure, the moon phase, any of that stuff, And back then it was like it was all gut. Like I think I'm gonna sit over here at this place today on this ladder stand because I haven't sat there in a while. Or last time I sat there, I saw a couple does, so I'm gonna sit there again. And there really wasn't too much thought process into when and where you were gonna hunt. It was just all like where you felt like going. And I stayed like that for quite some time. And I don't know how. It's probably only been maybe 5 seasons. I decided I was going to go mobile
Yeah.
right when the big craze came on. And the reason why wasn't because it was trending and everyone was talking about it and that's what all the cool kids were doing. I got permission to hunt a piece of town-owned property. So I guess it's public because the property is open to the public for hiking and, recreational use and, all that stuff. But as far as hunting was concerned, you had to be a town resident. You had to apply in the summertime. You had to it was like a lottery. You had to get your name drawn. You actually had to qualify. You had to shoot your bow in front of a member of town council.
Oh, wow.
But you would get a slip signed like it was privately owned. Like we need written permission to hunt private property. So you would get a slip signed as it was private because it's not owned by the state, it's owned by the town. But that piece came with a lot of logistics, rules, because there was so many people in town using the property. And one of the rules was no presets. You could not, whatever, you had to come in, hang, you could hunt, but you had to take your stand out with you. And I mean, I wanted to hunt this property bad. And it goes even deeper for me. That particular farm, my great grandfather used to own. It was
Okay, wow.
my family original farm. And my great grandfather was the mayor of my town at one time. So he kind of turned that property over to the town. That's how they got it. So I'm like, man, this is an opportunity for me to hunt my old family farm.
Yeah.
But I had to be mobile to do it. And I'll tell you what, like that first year, I was like, I didn't want to do it. Like I am so accustomed to walking in the dark, getting to the base of my tree, climbing up and sitting down.
Yeah.
Like you can't get in quieter and easier than that. And the thought of me going in the dark, hanging sticks, hanging a stand, getting all set up, oh man, it made me cringe. I'm like, there's no way you can kill a deer doing that. There's no way. Like, it never even crossed my mind, you know?
Yeah.
But I got a lock on and some sticks and started practicing in the backyard. I'd come home from work and I'd set it up, tear it down, set it up, tear it down, set it up, tear it down. Then I'd go inside, I'd eat dinner. After dinner, I'd go out in the dark, set it up in the dark, tear it down, set it up, tear it down. And I got pretty good at it. And that year I ended up I think I killed 3 deer that year with my bow, but 2 of them were, one of them was in the evening and one of them was in the morning. So one of them I went in, in the afternoon, hung, and the deer came by within bow range before dark. And another one I went in the dark, hung, and the deer came by, and I killed it with my bow. And I was like, man, this actually works. Like, they're not joking, And one of the thoughts that I had got, and I still do not know the answer to this question, but before I was mobile, I thought it was so cool that I would do my scouting. I could hang a ladder stand in July, set it up, trim the shooting lanes out, set it, forget it, not come back. I wouldn't hunt it early season or the pre-rut, and I could go to that stand on like the perfect day of the year, November 2nd, cold front, get in that stand, buck comes by, and I kill him with my bow. And it's like, man, that's cool. Like, I hung that stand in July, and I knew in November a buck was going to be within 18 yards of that stand.
Yeah.
Like, that's some pretty good, But the mobile thing is like, man, I could go in at 5 a.m. and kill a buck out of that tree at 7:30.
Yeah.
So they both have their cool aspects to it. One's like that long range forecast of like, this is going to work in a couple months. And one of them's like, no, I'm going in and he's going to walk by me today.
Yeah. No, man, I have an appreciation for that too. I too have grown up on private land, but kind of a similar experience just because, I remember back in the day, it would be, there would be the stands set by all the different guys on the lease, and we had rules where we could, or we had a kind of an unspoken rule, like, hey, as long as the guy ain't out there, like, everybody can hunt everybody else's stuff. Like, as long as you're contributing and putting into it, and everything, like, as long as the guy's not out there, everything's fair game. But there were so many times that me and my dad, like, growing up when I was a kid, like, I'm just going to go sit a road, I'm just going to go sit a clearing or whatever it might be. And the first actually really nice buck that I shot as a kid was, I decided I was going to hunt this stand up on this hill, and I went up there, and the dude had like padlocks all over his stand and everything that he had on there. It was a rifle stand. I wasn't a bow hunter yet growing up. And so I was like, well, I'll go over here, like kind of the same area, and I'll sit on the ground. And 2 hours later, I shot a really nice 10, the biggest buck I'd killed up until that time. So I was always intrigued by it and everything, but it wasn't until I really became a bow hunter that I feel like I started paying more attention to just whitetail behavior, all of the other elements and factors into a given hunt, that we pay attention to now. That's when I started honing in on that. And I think what hooked me too was me and a buddy went to got permission to hunt one piece of private and everything, but he wasn't set up for bow hunting. We wanted bow hunting. He said, hey, bring your stands, find a spot and hunt it. Long story short, we found a spot, and the next day he shot a 150-inch buck out of it, with me filming for him. And it's just like, that, to your point, like that's pretty cool. It's like, hey, we put in the work, we did quick work to determine, okay, this dry creek bed is where we're going to set up, and here comes the giant, so.
Yeah. Another funny thought that you actually just reminded me of is, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is, going back to when I was a kid and all the stuff we didn't pay attention to that we pay attention to now. I can remember like a light bulb moment where I was listening to a podcast. It was Dan Infolt talking about, hunting bedding areas and all that stuff. And like my wheels are turning and I'm just zoning out thinking about it. And I started thinking about some of the bucks I killed as a kid when I absolutely had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
The spot looks good and I see deer over here, so I'm going to pop up a ladder stand and like Dude, I'd kill like a decent, for 18, 16, 17, 18-year-old kid. Like I was doing all right for myself, rifle hunting, consistent. And I don't know why. Like it's just a good spot. Like I
Yeah.
found a good tree, and every year it produces, right? And then I started like breaking it down as my knowledge and exposure to information with YouTube and podcasts and stuff, and I learned more. Started thinking about the old spots, and I was like, dude, all I was doing was I was hunting the downwind side of the bedding.
Yeah.
I didn't know at the time. I didn't set up for that, but now I know. I understand prevailing winds.
Yeah.
And now I look at the spot, and I was like, well, we get northwest winds consistently in November, and I was set up on the south side of a thicket, not knowing it at the time, and I was just catching bucks cruising that downwind side of bedding, and had no clue.
Yeah.
It just picked the right spot, and it worked.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what that's like because before, exactly what you just said, I'd pick a spot, I'd go, I'm going to hunt here tonight, whatever. And now, I got two, two tree stands on our place that are my favorite, because this is year number 4 now, managing a little over 800 acres that we have down here, just our little group of people. And, so like last year I had a target buck coming in at the north, my favorite north tree stand. I had a target buck at the south, but both stands were face a slightly different direction and everything in the setups and everything. And like I was thinking last year, I'm like, man, the old me would have just been like, I want to hunt the white 8 tonight. Like I'm just going to go down there and sit. But now I'm like, nope, as much as I want to go down there and sit, I'm not going in there. The wind's wrong. This is wrong. That's wrong. He's not daylighting yet. And like I think it was November 14th last year before I finally was out there with the right wind and pictures of him in daylight, and it was like, okay, it's all coming together. Yeah. And I wish I had a story to go with that where I went down there and they killed the deer. It was rut, and I was going down to my stand to get my stand for the afternoon evening. It was like 1:00, and that I turned the corner of my truck going down the gravel road, still a ways from the stand. That deer is standing in the road looking at me. I'm like, holy crap. And a doe runs out in front of him, and he takes off after her. I'm like, okay, he's down here. He's in the bottom. Like he's chasing. And I got in the stand, long story short. That was the night I caught the neighbor trespassing and ruined my whole hunt. So, sometimes you can't win.
Yeah. Those are those outside factors, and like to circle back, because we kind of got a little sidetracked from your original question about hunting public and dealing with other people and stuff like that, and going back to growing up private, I was able to, and I'm sure you can relate, you can have those stands that you leave alone.
Right.
All that early season, like I'm not sitting that stand, it's early season, they're not killable right now, right? And the other thing back to hunting Connecticut is, obviously everyone knows it's a small state. We typically have smaller parcels of land. So if you snag a 30, 40 acre piece of private, like that's a good chunk of land. Unfortunately, you probably don't have food and bedding on your 40. You might have food, you probably don't have bedding. You might have bedding, you probably don't have food. You might not have either. One neighbor might have bedding and one might have food, and you're just hunting the transition in the middle. Every piece is different. So we get a lot of deer that aren't really killable outside of the rut because he's just doing his food to bed pattern. And if you're not in the middle, you're constricted by property lines.
Yeah.
Some of the neighboring states, unfortunately, Connecticut's like the only one that's like this. We have to have written permission from the landowner. States like Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, if it's not posted, it's basically public land.
Really?
And
interesting.
they'll post it every 25 feet, clear as day, properly posted. But if you pull up, same thing with turkey hunting. If you pull up on the side of the road and you see a deer or turkey out in a field and you don't see a posted sign, it's fair game.
Wow.
Not the case in Connecticut, So, man, I keep getting sidetracked. So,
no, you're good.
Back to what I was saying is, so I might have a good stand that I know, like maybe it's a good rut stand, and I know I can kill deer from the rut on a piece of private. I can't hunt that September, October, right? I'm just going to do more harm than good. I'm going to, contaminate it, too much scent. Maybe our wind flips in the middle of the season. Like early season, we tend to get a lot more southerly winds, and then late October, November, they kind of flip to the north.
Yep.
Private land, you can leave those stands. I know no one's hunted that corner of the property. Nobody, because I'm the only one that's got permission, or me and my dad, and he ain't hunted it, and I haven't hunted it, and I can leave it alone. And I know when I jump on that stand November 2nd, that's the first sit of the year.
Mm-hmm.
You get into private, I might analyze a section of public. I might analyze a section of public, and I know, like, hey, this is going to be like a late October, early November spot. It's got to be a northwest wind. I'm not hunting it. Well, that doesn't stop another guy from just pounding it open and weak, right? And like, bless his heart, he might not have the knowledge or whatever. He might not care. I don't know. That's his hunt. It's public land. He's got every right to do it. But like, you might look at it like, man, he doesn't have he's not killing that buck. Like, he's just not. It's just not happening in that spot this time of year. And I might not even know he was in there. So now when I show up first week in November and I'm not seeing any deer, I got to try to figure out, I got to look for sign of other hunters, like, whether it be reflective thumbtacks that guys use to find their stands, or boot tracks, or, little signs like that to know, like, man, this place already got pounded. Like, these deer are not here anymore because of hunting pressure.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the game within the game.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. And I love asking these questions because it's intriguing to me, just the differences, just different parts of the country, different states, and all that kind of stuff. And don't know a whole lot of people that hunt up there in your area, so I'm always curious to discover new areas. That was something that was really foreign to me. I went to Colorado last year on this mule deer hunt, and it's flatland Colorado, practically Nebraska. It's not mountainous like people would think, but we're hunting farmland, and they call it walk-in out there, basically, where private landowners can, get paid money by the state to allow people to hunt their land, and they can sign it up for just small game or small and big game, whatever it might be. And that was so foreign to me. Like, you'd roll up on a field, and of course you're looking at onX and all that kind of stuff to help you out, but you roll up on a field and somebody else owns it. There might have been another dude there an hour ago for all you know, but hey, fair game. And just down here in Texas, it's everybody holds their land so close to themselves, and and I mean, I'm guilty of it. I don't want the neighbor trespassing on my hunting ground. I get that, but it's just a foreign concept to me.
Yeah. Now, when you were in Colorado, did you obviously ran into hunting pressure on those public grounds? We
ran into some. We were hunting archery, like, for the first 5-6 days, I think, because I had an archery tag. The other two guys, one had an archery tag that turned into a rifle tag after about, I think, on day 7 of the hunt, and the other guy had a rifle tag that opened day 7. So we really didn't have a whole lot of pressure to deal with when I was hunting and when I killed mine. It was as we started getting toward that day 7 mark when rifle season was going to come in. On day 6, we have this long story and everything. I think in episode 167 of our show we talk about it, but we ran.
This is your kill?
No, so I killed mine with a bow on.
I think this is the one, that the spot and stalk.
Yeah, so
you told it on the podcast.
Yeah, the same experience. I killed mine on day 3, but there were 2 other guys with me that had tags, and so we were. After I killed mine, we're obviously grinding to try and get them theirs. One of them having an archery tag also. So on day 6, the last day of bow only, right? It's we're archery hunting, trying to get him on a whitetail. And again, long story short, there was an old geezer out there that just was trying to shoot him a deer with a rifle and didn't like the fact that we were going after the buck he had an eye on. So it was a cat and mouse game with him all day, with both of us trying to shoot this deer. He was trying to shoot this deer at an opportunity where we couldn't see him shoot the deer with a rifle, and we were trying to shoot him legally but also keep him off of him. It was a whole day of adventure with that, and something I'd never experienced before. But yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that, but yeah, it was.
We were just talking about like hunting pressure, and
where
I was going with it is like, it's a blessing and a curse because everybody's got the same tools now, right? So
Right.
again, I hate to sound like I'm an old geezer, but I remember not having smartphones and not having Onyx
Oh
and
yeah.
Spartan 4 hunt stand and all that stuff. And I remember getting my first handheld GPS device, and it had some property lines on it, like public property line, and it was a black and white screen. And I remember finding, at one time, I think everybody thought this one brook was the property line, including myself. And then I found out there was a little chunk on the other side of the brook that was still public, and got in there, and it was like a honey hole. It took 1 year, and somehow, I was a kid. I was probably 20 years old at the time, 21 years old. All of a sudden, the gig was up. Everyone all figured out that once you break down the door, everybody's like, oh, you can go over there, and it's not a secret anymore.
Yeah.
So with these apps, I use them heavily, I rely on them heavily, but so does everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really hard to find a honey hole or a secret spot or a spot that nobody else has been to. I still struggle with it. We'll see what happens this year. Maybe I'll come back on in a couple of months with a real badass story. But even now, I'll think I'm like, oh, dude, that's you know what? That's a sneaky little spot right there. You got to really have an eye to recognize it, and I'll go in there and I'll scope it out, and I'm like, oh man, there's a scrape right here. They're doing exactly what I think, and turn around and start walking back to the truck, and 60 yards back to the truck, there's a cell cam. I'm like, somebody knows, somebody found the spot. I'm not the only one,
Yeah.
So this year, going into this season, my biggest, tactic that I have is I'm trying to go not necessarily deep, but it usually is deep, but I'm trying to get the spots that are pretty hard to get to, whether it be swamps, terrain, hills, long walks over hills, through swamps. And I look at it this way, I'm pretty tough. I'm not super fit, but I'm in decent shape, and I can grind, right?
Yeah.
That's probably my best attribute as a deer hunter is I'm a grinder. And if I can find a spot where I'm like, dude, this is gonna suck to get back here. If I think it sucks, I gotta think that at least 75% of other guys aren't even going to attempt it.
Yeah.
And that kind of narrows it down to a smaller, percentage of the possibility of running into other hunting pressure. And there's a lot of times I'll look at, Spartan Forge, and I'll see a spot. I'm like, yeah, it looks like a great spot, transition line, and there's some terrain features. And I'm like, it's too easy. It's so obvious. There's just a beacon on the app. It's just right there, and it's, a quarter mile from the parking lot. I got to think every single guy that opens up his app has dropped a pin on that spot, has scouted it. There's probably already a camera there. There's probably a lock-on stand there, and there's going to be hunting pressure there. I don't want anything to do with that. I want to go where there's a good chance. Maybe one other guy, I can deal with that. But yeah, I got to try to get away from everybody else.
Yeah. I feel like that's something that is said the most when it comes to hunting public land. Doesn't matter if it's, for smaller pieces or for whitetails or going out west for big game out there, whatever, go where nobody else is willing to go. That's where you'll find success or a better chance of it at least.
Unfortunately, I still think it holds true for sure, because like I said, you are going to weed out some of the, weaker minds. But, again, with the apps, to be able to see the spots, we have all the gear right now is incredible, right?
Yeah.
The boots and the clothing and the as a mobile hunter deer, the sticks and the platform, being a saddle hunter, a lot of guys they know they've got to go deeper. So sometimes you can go deeper and still run into that pressure because everybody's thinking the same thing and have the ability to do it. But I still think you're better off that than the closer to the parking lot, more obvious spots,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
We'll see what happens. I found a couple. I'm pretty excited about a couple spots this year, and they're brand new to me. I've never hunted these spots before. I'm pretty excited about the way they're laying out, and haven't seen any other hunting pressure, knock on wood. No one's showed up on my cameras. We're like a week out from the season, so we'll see how it pans out. But I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, man. Again, hopefully we have you back on with an awesome success story to go with it. That'd be awesome.
Oh, man, I hope so.
Well, I know we're getting close to that hour mark if we hadn't hit it already, but I got a couple questions I want to hit you with that we always try to ask the first time that they're joining us on the show and everything. And the first one is there a favorite hunting memory in particular that sticks out in your mind that you want to share with us?
Oh man, I just got asked this the other day, and like I had like 3 in mind. Yeah, you know what? Just because it crossed my mind earlier in this podcast, I'll stick with this one. And it goes back to earlier in the podcast when I was telling the story about having that spot that I didn't know why it was good, but it was, and it produced. And then later in life, I realized why it was good. It was the first year. So prior to this, I would sit with my dad. We'd have a homemade, a wooden 2-man. We called it the condo, but it was a 2-man homemade wooden stand that had a roof on it and everything.
Yeah.
And I would sit with my dad. Well, I finally come to that age where I was going to have my own stand and I was going to sit by myself. Santa Claus had brought me a Winchester Model 70 270 that year, but Santa Claus dropped it off in October. So I would have it in November. So the Santa Claus dropped it off early.
Santa Claus heads up. Yeah.
Yeah, Santa Claus was the man in my house. He brought a lot of good hunting gear, But yeah, so I had my very own rifle. I was gonna hang my own stand, and my dad asked me where I wanted to put my stand. And the reason why I had picked my spot was prior to this, I was the bird dog because I wasn't hunting by myself. So there was a lot of back to the stone walls. Dad would be like, follow that wall up the hill there. There's gonna be 2, 3, the third intersection of stone walls. Take a left, come across the top of that hill. I'll be right here waiting for you. Okay, and I'd go up the hill, cut through this thicket. Next, Dad would shoot, and I'd be pushing them deer. Well, I didn't know it at the time, but I was exploring bedding area. I was pushing bedding area for him. So fast forward to this story. Dad says, where do you want to put your stand? And I was like, oh, up here on this hill. This is the hill that I had always been pushing for him all these years. So lo and behold, there was a break in the wall right there too,
Yeah.
One of them old barways. So we hang the stand, and it was open day of rifle season. We go in and, we get to that split where the condo's to the right and my new stand's to the left. And we were only a couple hundred yards apart. And Dad goes to the condo and I go to my new ladder stand, and I'm sitting there, and it's about 8:30 in the morning, and I look up and there's 2 bucks coming. And dude, I am shaking like a leaf. I'm talking hyperventilating. One of them was a pretty good, respectable 8-pointer, and one was like a decent 6-pointer, And man, I could not get a shot off at that 8-pointer. And like nowadays, I would thread one in there no problem, but not at that age with that experience, And I couldn't get that shot. And they're sitting there, and they didn't fight. I'd be exaggerating if I said they fought, but they kind of sparred. Like the 8-pointer kind of gave him a little nudge, and he followed that stone wall right down the hill, and that 6-pointer did not move. I mean, he just did not take a step after that. And he's going right down that stone wall, man, and that stone wall leads right to the condo. And I'm like, so I got the gun up. I got my left elbow on my left knee for support, and I'm holding it. And man, my leg's shaking, and I can't hold it. And I got it on that 6-pointer, and I just don't have a shot. There's just a couple of little saplings there, and I'm like, Dad's gonna shoot. Dad's gonna shoot. Dad's gonna shoot. Like, come on. And lo and behold, boom! Dad shoots. And I'm happy Dad shot, but I'm also like thinking like that kind of ruined my chance, right? And Dad gets out of the, I don't know this at the time, but Dad gets out of the stand. He walks over to his deer, and just as he bends over to like check out the rack, the 6-pointer I was watching took one step. I pulled the trigger and dropped it. Did I slow the audio? Boom! The 6-pointer drops. Well, my dad doesn't know what to think. Like he's not thinking I just shot a deer right after he shot a deer, right? So he's kind of scared. Like, all as a father, like what's going through? Did I try to climb down to come see him and fall out of the shot? Like he's freaking out. So he comes running up the hill and he's like, Steven. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you're all right? Like, what's going on? I was like, did you shoot that 8-pointer? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, why? And I was like, because I shot the 6-pointer with him. And it was just awesome, man. We doubled up for opening day. And my grandfather was there too in a separate stand. So like, we've got pictures of me and my dad and my grandpa with those 2 bucks in the back of the truck. And like, hands down, the most memorable opening day of rifle season ever. And
Wow.
being my first my own rifle on my own stand, and I picked the tree out, like like I'm one of the big boys now. I got to pick my own stand out and all that stuff, and yeah, it was just awesome.
Man, that's an awesome story. And man, it's crazy. I love hearing you talk about, all these hunting stories from growing up and everything and learning to hunt leading up into now. You are, even though I'm in Texas, man, you're literally reminding me of, like, I have so many experiences that are so similar to this that I feel like I can relate to. It's just, growing up hunting with my dad and everything, and the time when, golly, got some on my throat. The time when I was, finally able to hunt by myself or, pick the spot for my first stand, all that kind of stuff. And I hope you don't mind if I share one real quick. I wasn't planning on it, but I remember there was one spot that I can't remember. It was certainly a group effort, this clearing that we wanted to put a ground blind in and everything. And we set one up and everything. And, down here we can bait, we had feeders and everything. So, I'm hunting there one morning. My dad's hunting up the hill from me, and it's getting pretty late in the morning toward the time when we would normally, call it quits. And I look up and there's a big, just one of the biggest bodied does I've ever seen in my life standing at the feeder. And I get my gun up and I get on her and everything, and the feeder pole is like going right in front of where I would need to place my shot. And I'm thinking to myself, don't shoot the pole, but I'm going to shoot her. So I take a shot and she runs off and everything. And I'm all excited, again, about the time that we normally get out. So dad's there pretty quick and stuff. And he's like, did you get one? I was like, yeah, I shot a doe. And we walk up to the feeder, and there's a hole through that leg, through that pole. And he's like, you shot the pole. It's like, I tried not to. Like, I feel like I hit her, but yeah, I shot the pole. So we wandered around the woods for, I don't know, an hour or however long, looking for blood, hair. There was a little bit of hair next to the pole, but that was it. We couldn't find anything, no blood or nothing. And we were about to call it quits, like, hey, we can't find this deer. And we're literally, the grass is pretty tall. We're walking back toward the feeder, and we almost step on her, just laying there in the tall grass and everything. And it had literally gone through the pole and killed her and stuff. But that one sticks out in my mind because my dad could not get over the size of this doe. She's just this massive doe, and I'm a kid. Like, I shot this deer that's bigger than I am. And
yeah,
it's I don't know, it's just, that's one spot I remember him and I finding that spot. No, it's just a clearing, right? But there's no other thought other than, yeah, this is good. That's it.
It looks like a deer spot.
Yeah, this is good. We'll put a stand here, and we put a stand there, and that was the first deer that either of us shot out of there. So that always sticks out in my mind. And my dad listens to the podcast. When he hears that story, it'll probably take him back. He's gonna know which deer I'm talking about. But
yeah, and I hate to say it, it's sad but true. The story that I just told and the story that you just told, they almost get overlooked nowadays because they're not the cool stories anymore. And I've made the joke on our podcast before, like, if you don't have the talking points in your podcast that you're on public land, in a saddle, you kayaked in, or e-bike, like, it's not cool. Like, it's not a cool, that's your story. Like, that's not cool. Right? And it's like, no, man, like, some of my best hunting stories are like the most, like I said, ladder stand with my rifle. Didn't know what I was doing, but damn, man, we were having fun. We were having fun. And like I've said it several times on this podcast, we didn't have a care in the world. I don't know which way the wind's blowing. I don't care. All I know is it's 32 degrees and it's deer season. And I'm going to sit here, see what happens, you know? Yeah. And those are some of the best stories.
I couldn't agree more, man. It takes me back to. Next question I got for you. What is on your bucket list? What hunts do you want to go on that you would consider a once in a lifetime hunt you haven't gotten to do yet?
Oh, all of them.
All of them. Good answer.
Yeah. It's hard for me, vacation time's tough, and I've always dedicated a lot of my vacation time to my deer season,
Yeah.
right? It's easy. I don't go, and I mean, I have gone to Ohio, but like a lot of times I'll take a couple weeks off in November and stay home
Yeah.
and just hunt 2-3 weeks straight. I've bear hunted a few times. I'm going back to Canada this coming up spring for another bear hunt. And then 2025, my dad, he's got a moose tag for New Brunswick, Canada. So I'll be going with him for his hunt. I'm going to film, for his moose hunt. Moose has always been high on my bucket list, like believe it or not, over elk. I've spent a lot of time in Canada as a kid in bear camp, and I've always seen moose. So I've always been drawn to them.
Yeah.
But everyone says you gotta do the elk, like, right? Like that's gotta be top dog. Like everyone should, feel like everybody should or wants to experience, chasing those elk through the mountains and hearing them bugle and all that stuff. So I would have to say it's probably elk. I would like to get that, and then this is more achievable for me just because of where we are. There's a sick of deer in Maryland. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Oh, I'm well aware. Our team that we have kind of up that way. They're actually trying to plan a hunt right now to go for some of those. I can't go, but it sounds awesome.
Yeah, that's a lower end bucket list for me, because it's not a very far drive for me to get to where those little suckers are. So I'd like to at least try that.
Yeah.
That'll give me a little bit of experience before I can get out west for the elk hunt,
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely elk.
That's
for
awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. That seems to be a big one for a lot of people. If you don't go west all the time, or certainly if you don't live out that way, that's on everybody's list somewhere in the top 5 at least. It seems like so.
Yeah, axis deer too.
Axis is fun,
Mainly
man.
because it gives me an excuse to go to Hawaii too.
Oh yeah.
So go to Hawaii, get a vacation in Hawaii, and maybe kill something while I'm there. So it's kind of like 2 birds with 1 stone.
That's awesome. Yeah, that'd be a fun time for sure. Well, the last question I'm going to hit you with, man, and it's actually, I take 0 credit for it because I want to know the answer, and it's the question that you guys ask all of your guests on your podcast. But with you being one of the co-hosts, I want to know, and I may get the wording backwards, forgive me if I do, but what drives you outdoors?
Ooh, that's a sneaky one there, buddy. I've had, you'd be surprised how many times I've had to answer this, and it never gets easier.
Yeah.
But to me, it's incontrollable, right? Like there's like a burning inner passion to be in the outdoors, to especially like hunting and fishing and chasing game, and like I hate to say it, like killing stuff, right? Like you're providing the feeling you get. It's not just about the kill, but the best way I can describe it is it's literally like you hear people say a lot of times, it's in my blood. It's in my blood.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like when people say that, that's like a couple generations, right?
Yeah.
My dad hunted, my grandpa hunted, my great grandpa hunted. To me, it's in my DNA. And when I say DNA, it's like this is caveman shit. Like this goes all the way back to primal hunter gatherers, kill something, meat over an open fire to survive. You know what I mean? So when you are chasing that game, like it may be a sport in 2024, right? Like it's a sport. Like we go out and we don't nobody has to hunt to survive. Nobody we have grocery stores. We can get food wherever we want. But to me, there's more to it. It's that burning desire inside to pursue that animal like human beings have done for millions of years.
Yeah.
And if you have that inside you and you feel that, there's no stopping it. Like you have to feel that urge, or it's going to come out.
That's awesome. Couldn't have said it better myself, man. Great answer. Well, Man, let our listeners know where they can find you guys, where they can listen to the podcast, all that good stuff.
Yeah, so it's the Outdoor Drive. We're on all pretty much all podcast platforms. New episodes drop every Friday. We're also on all your other platforms: Facebook, the Outdoor Drive, Instagram, the Outdoor Drive. I think Trev might mess around a little bit with TikTok. I'm not sure. TikTok's been kind of weird lately. And then we also have a Facebook group, which is called. So the Facebook page is the Outdoor Drive podcast, but then we have a group page called the Outdoor Drive, which is a public group where anybody can comment, post. We try to encourage people, like if you have a successful hunt or a good story, to post on there. And I always try to shout out listeners and people that post on that page on our podcast every week. I try to do a thing called the Killer's Corner, and anyone that posts on our group page, I'll give them a shout out on that week's podcast.
That's awesome. That's a good idea. We might have to do something like that over here. I love getting the listener base and the followers and stuff involved. That's cool. Well, man, thank you very much for joining me for an episode. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a good time, and appreciate you coming on the show.
Always, man. I knew we were going to get it. It took us a little while, but
yeah,
we were going to get it for sure.
I
think the last time we tried, you're like, man, I don't think there's something out in the universe that doesn't want us to podcast together.
Yeah, I sent something like that one time. This is the third or fourth date I think that we've tried to nail down to make this happen, but I'm glad we finally got it done, and I'll have to get Trev on here next and get pick his brain a little bit. So
for sure.
Well, thank
you, man. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Glad got it done.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I am too. I appreciate you coming on. And for our listeners, thank you all for tuning in. I'll be back with you guys again next week for another episode. Catch you then.